Hi, everyone. Welcome to this very, very important, powerful session today that we are about to begin on learning, understanding, diving deep into inner development goals, which is a very relevant and important topic. And we have a very, very important guest, someone who is very passionate about this topic. And I would like to welcome Jana, and I would like to welcome all of you for joining here today. And I think what really elates my mind as we begin this conversation today is that you are someone who recognizes the importance of inner expansion, expansion of consciousness itself, and bringing that brilliance to the world and to the beautiful blue planet that we live in. So I believe that we tonight come together to discuss something that is absolutely important, which will create ripples, not just only tonight within our minds, but the generations to come, and also healing our earth as well, right? So with that, I would like to officially introduce our speaker today, Jana, my very good friend. Thank you for being here. So Jana Kadian is
Thank
a
you, Fernando.
development finance executive with over 10 years of experience leading microfinance institutions, banks in frontier countries across Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Latin America, and her leadership focus on building resilience, adaptive organizational cultures, and promoting sustainable growth from within. Yana's coaching approach enhances team resilience, cohesion, and skills development, making her a pivotal figure in leadership development. And I can vouch for this because I am not only connected to Yana as a professional, but also as a friend. So if you ask me how I would like to introduce Yana is as a deeply authentic, passionate, and a soulful human being. And I think we are absolutely lucky to have her presence today. So, Yana, I'm not sure if I did the justice to your introduction. And how would you like to introduce yourself? So, I'm passing on the session to you.
Oh, wonderful. Fernando, thank you so very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited seeing you all. I'm excited to see your faces and the names of a lot of people I know and have worked together, or also a lot of friends here. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is actually my first webinar, so you will see me being a little bit nervous at some points, but I'm going to trooper through that. Well, welcome. Welcome to our webinar on the inner development goals. Today, we're going to have a little bit of an experiment, actually, because we have two communities here. We have the beautiful Ignite coaching community, and we also have, I think, a lot of community members from the financial inclusion world, leaders, professionals, so people who have made their career in that field. So I think today we also have a little bit of an opportunity to integrate those two perspectives as we're talking about something so, authentically unitive as the inner development goals. But before we dive into that, let me give you a little bit of a kind of background where I'm coming from. Couple of pictures from the last 20 years of journeys through purpose and culture. Overall, for the last 20 years, I was very fortunate. I have had the chance to build, to nurture teams, to develop business and operational models in different countries. Last 15 years, as a CEO of different microfinance companies in many countries. That was a very interesting experience. And I think I've learned on very kind of experiential, but also intuitive level that, especially in crisis situation, it's kind of the deeper inner human capacities which do make a difference. Capacities like the ability to truly relate to each other, of like self-awareness of the leaders which you are following and which are there to create an environment in which everybody can succeed and excel, and particularly positive regard, the perseverance, creativity. Those make a difference. And I think in those 20 years, I also made a lot of mistakes and had a chance to learn from them. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the inner development goals, which were at some point a real revelation in my life. Maybe let me.
Yeah, Jana, before you move forward, we see some really vibrant, diverse images you included in them. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the stories behind these images?
Yeah, sure. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Well, as I said, I was really fortunate to have been thrown around the world and doing microfinance. And for the one round on the call who's not familiar with the concept of microfinance, is the idea of how can you provide fair and sustainable and caring financial services to people who are usually excluded from that, where banks do not serve those clients because they're too poor, they don't know how to assess their credit history and credit worthiness and so forth. So my whole life, and I think good amount of people on that call, your life was focusing on similar direction. So what you see here on the left side, this is my team from Malawi. It's our Christmas party, actually, where we celebrated on Lake Malawi. That was a very interesting experience because it was incredibly humbling. That was one of those moments where I really learned the meaning of, the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone, because I tried to go fast and it did not work. And I really had to learn to slow down, to become in tune with my team, to realize that most of the time, if I want to open up their creativity, I need to make them feel and make sure, authentically feel like I have the best for them personally in mind for each individual person. That's a very, very specific cultural context. And I think I learned a lot from that. Right below, you see the team in Finka, Tajikistan, which was an amazing team who were there right off, also again in a crisis environment and in a very, let's say, in a situation where we actually had to let 1/3 of our staff go and did it, but there was just not a choice, but we did it in a way that people felt, well, we have to make decisions like that. Those are decisions that they still carried with them. So overall, we saved that company at that point, and I'm still incredibly thankful to all my team members there for what I've had for chances to learn and to develop myself. And then my last assignment actually was 6 years in Myanmar, where I had the chance to start up a microfinance company from scratch in northern Myanmar. We grew incredibly fast. We had, in 4 years, we had close to 60,000 customers. And it was an incredible time where things just developed very fast in the country. Everybody was very hopeful, and which most of you probably know, in 2021, the country saw, we had a military coup, and the world changed from one to another, and the country just went into a civil war. So on top, you see the peace and love. This is the monks demonstrating for a better future. So that was also an environment where I learned to experience what it means to lead in a crisis, when it boils down to real relationships and making decisions which are consequential for many people, and what it means to listen to people and tune into the reality around you. So when I left Myanmar, that was around the same time when I actually found or discovered the inner development goals. And to be honest, I felt like I finally found a language, a clarity, which really resonated with my experience. I felt like I found a framework which kind of simplifies the complexities of human capacity into something which can be kind of universally and cross-culturally related to. That means, you know, working in different cultures, I always had that impression or that feeling that you have a cultural kind of context, which can be very different from country to country, obviously. But then if you work through that and you are respectful of that, you always get to a level which is very similar regardless of the culture. And those are the human capacities which I then suddenly recognized in the inner development goals as a framework to be, to rely on and create based on. Maybe from there, let me tell you a little bit about what they actually are, because I'm referring to inner development goals, but what are they? So inner development goals. So basically, oops, sorry, let me go back. No. I don't know if it's changing. Yeah. Tick. One more. Next one. Stay here. Yes, thank you. Okay, cool. Well, the inner development goals are kind of the counterpart to the sustainable development goals. And they came about based on the recognition that while we have agreed on the sustainable development goals now, 2015, so far the progress has not been very impressive. And despite clear goals, we seem to be missing something. And that something is actually the inner dimension. The idea is that if we want to make decisions and in a way that are sustainable, long-term, and appropriate within the complexity of reality, it has to go along with a certain perspective from your certain state in your inner development, certain mindset, certain abilities to think and to sense systemically and to make systemic decisions. So there is kind of a pressing need to increase our collective abilities to face, relate, and effectively work with the complex challenges we have in front of us. And without a foundational shift in human values and also our leadership capacities, any solution to our global challenges will be limited. It will be reactive, it will be too slow, and often simply short-lived. The inner development goals framework was designed as an answer to that. If we see the sustainable goals as the external goals, the underlying inner development is the attempt to formulate those goals as a parallel construct, a parallel framework. And basically, it is a Norwegian NGO in 2020 asked herself the question, what are the inner skills, qualities we do need to develop to handle an increasingly complex and challenging world? And based on that question, and based on the survey, which I think surveyed over 1,000 people in actually a lot in the coaching and in adult development, as well as in corporate world, and grounded in really interdisciplinary research, as well as supported by thought leaders like Peter Senge and Robert Keegan from MIT and Harvard. The IDGs were developed, and they essentially like a roadmap what can assist us as we're navigating and developing our inner lives to catalyze the outer change we will need to see in our world if we are to sustain ourselves as humanity. So that's kind of where we're coming from with that framework. I would like to invite you to watch a short video produced by the Inner Development Goals, and then from there I would propose we jump into a bit more deep dive in the individual capacities and components of the framework. Fernando, would you mind?
The Inner Development Goals show what inner shifts or human growth needs to happen in order for us to increase our chances of reaching the Sustainable Development Goals collectively.
The Inner Development Goals covers 23 skills that are divided into 5 categories. Skills such as inner compass, openness and learning mindset, self-awareness, presence, sense-making, connectedness, humility, co-creation skills, trust, and perseverance.
What I see as the basic human challenge, when we talk about mind shift, when we talk about growth that matters, I think the basic human challenge is this. It is difficult to learn if you already know.
We see a lot of leadership failure, leaders being out of touch with reality. So in other words, it's a lack of listening. So listening, I believe, is not just an important one, it's the most important and most underrated leadership skill today.
Obviously, being flexible, being able to be agile, being able to listen, and be able to be very inclusive in terms of how you lead people. I think those are some of the things that I've learned over the time.
We are built to grow. It is our destiny to grow. A caterpillar is not supposed to die as a caterpillar. Its destiny is to grow wings and fly.
We need to sort of focus more inwards, and what is my responsibility in that? What can I contribute to a development that is more sustainable? But in order to be able to reach those sustainability goals, we need to also be able to take the right decisions to get there.
And I think where we are today, perhaps, is we've hit a limit to purely technocratic external solutions to solve global problems. Mental health and well-being is supported by our inner capacities for spirituality and faith, where education is fundamentally oriented towards meaning and purpose in a changing world, rather than mere content delivery for students.
Being human has many dimensions, and that the dimension that we have been very good at exploring during the last couple of 100 years has been the external world. But that we have come to a point where the outside perspective has to be complemented by an inside perspective.
Teaching a course like Global Challenges at Stockholm School of Economics, I realize more and more that we cannot reach the sustainability goals if we do not work with our inner development. This does not apply only to universities. This applies to all sectors, all ages.
What we really need is a deliberately developmental society. And depending on how severe you think the situation is, maybe we need a deliberately developmental world. And right now, we're not even talking about, at scale, the inner dimensions and how we need to change. Because at the core, we are the problem. The way that we're acting in the world and the way that we are solving problems is the problem.
I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation.
Any sustainable development goal, that's essentially our generation's big, ambitious vision for the world. In our experience, when we work with individuals, both within and outside Oxford, people are more likely to take action when these inspiring visions are brought down to their level.
We bring now the Inner Development Goals with us as a great source of inspiration when we strengthen and revise our competence development roadmaps and make sure that the Inner Development Goals are integrated into this.
And as Einstein said, we are never going to be able to solve our problems with the same order of consciousness that created these problems. So as a species, we need more and more of us to grow and develop so that we have actually a bigger purchase on, a bigger perspective on, a bigger ability to solve the biggest, most dangerous kinds of challenges that we face.
To make the world work better requires highly specialized skills, very useful, but quite high-level skills. And so what we want to say to people is, yes, it's great that you want to help make the world work better, but you have to get into training.
Thank you, Fernando. Well, I think it's one of those inspiring videos. For me, you know, as I said, I found the inner development goals around 2 years ago and went to last year to a conference in in Stockholm, where around 2,000 people came together to actually, from all different directions, from politics, from economics, from educational direction, a lot of coaches. And for me, that was an experience which I never had before. The conversations, the inspiration I took from there were on a different level. And so I decided this is something I really want to pursue and see how we can build that into my career, but also just start sharing with people. Now, let me invite you to a small deep dive into the actual framework. Let me share my screen again. All right. No. Okay, cool. Give me a second. Okay, good. So the next 15 minutes, I propose, I invite you to do a deep dive into the inner development goals. This is a general overview. You see where we're looking here at 5 dimensions and 23 critical skills. If you look at the dimension, we're starting from being, which is basically your relationship to yourself, something we need internally to develop. Thinking, or cognitive skills, how do we perceive the world, how do we think, and how do we see the world? Relating, which is caring for others, caring for the world around us. Collaborating, how do we work with people together? What are our social skills? How we integrate ourselves into our community. And acting, which is how do we impact the world? Really, how we enabling change. And if you see this is kind of like a path from inner focus towards the focus and changing and enabling change out in the external world. And with the idea is clearly that it's the inner world and our perspective towards ourselves and the world which can make a change. If we dive a little bit into individual directions, now let me say something. So before we, so in the next 10, 15 minutes, we're diving into the individual dimensions. And then I would like to invite you to come into breakout rooms and to actually see how you relate to the different dimensions. So just giving you kind of heads up, that will be, I think, a very interesting exercise. So the first dimension is being. It's really how do we relate to ourselves. And here a lot is really around our inner compass. What is the purpose in our life? How do we see ourselves as part of something bigger, and therefore take responsibility for the bigger picture and not only for ourselves, our own personal well-being. Integrity, authenticity, ability to be sincere, honest, and committed. One very important component here is the self-awareness. How far can we regulate ourselves? How far we can perceive our ability to impact others and therefore have a realistic self-image. Very important is presence. Are we here? Are we able to be in the present moment, to see the reality as it is, and without judging others, and really interesting. You know what's interesting? Let me share that. The actual explanation here are bringing me out of the real relationship to the individual skills. Let me go ahead. Okay, so being is something where we really look out internally, and how do we relate to our own internal world. The second dimensions we're looking at is thinking, our cognitive skills. Here I would like to point out sense making. I personally find that skill incredibly important, because that's actually what allows us to sense into the reality around us, to see connections, and then be able to connect the dots, and therefore communicate something which suddenly comes from which is actually creating something new. Long-term orientation, very important, as well as visioning, being able to envision a world beyond a short-term perspective, being able to think about how would the world would look like when my children are as old as I am today, and therefore acting and thinking in those kind of next level perspective. Awareness of complexity. We often are, let's say, rather constrained or scared of complexity, and we tend to therefore go to immediate, fast decisions or technical solutions. Complexity means to be able to actually hold contradictions for a while, let them evolve, and let the context around evolve, so they can so the decisions we make at the end are actually systemic rather than technical and reactive. Critical thinking is also a very big component of that. Be able to actually take away your own emotions and assess situations as they are from different perspectives. Yeah. If we go to relating, here one of very important skills from my perspective and also from my experience is actually humility. The ability to step back, take your own ego out of the equation, be able to observe a situation and relate to others, not how they impact you, but how can you support the emerging dynamics and nudge them into the right direction. I think humility is a very core skill, which also goes a lot along with listening and learning. Appreciation is another very important skill for me, because if people around you feel that you really appreciate their thoughts, their situations, their ideas. You're curious about them. That opens up creativity. It creates psychological safety and the ability of people to tap into their own potential. Connectedness. The idea that, no, I'm not just myself and my family. I'm actually much bigger. I'm part of something bigger, and what I'm doing today has bigger impact than just the immediate visible impact. And therefore, my actions should be perceived beyond that. And my thinking about my impact should be wider. So relating here, empathy and compassion are the other two incredibly important components. Compassion, actually something I have fairly recently really dove into as a skill or thought a lot about, which is at its core the understanding that no matter what, the person in front of you will always need your understanding and your support. And when the moment you take things personally, you take away the chance for that person to actually show themselves and open themselves. So compassion is one of those moments of real, actual inner work towards how do you relate and how do you see the world and how do you relate to the people and the world around you. So a very important skill, which I think we all tend to exercise, and sometimes really have to exercise on a very conscious level. I'm very thankful for actually having discovered that as an instrument or as a skill. Collaborating. So how do we actually make things work? Here, I think the communication skills are very on top. And in communication skills, for me, listening. And listening not only to hear and to answer, but listening to hear the full story, to sense into the situation. And particularly, I think the coaches on that call, you know what that means, sensing into beyond just what you listen. And that is for me, at the core of communication skills. Now, then to be able to make yourself understood in a way that it arrives correctly, that it arrives within the emotional on context situation of the person in front of you is another component of that. Co-creation skills. Here, for me personally, is one of the key skills leaders need to be able to have and need to develop and strengthen. It's the ability to really motivate people around a vision, recognize the potential, recognize the skill set, the potential, and also the combination of skill sets you see in your different colleagues and the people you co-create with, and allow those potentials to connect in a way that they're actually enjoying the process. Because if we were able to get to that level, the result is on a different level of creativity, and it also allows people to think beyond the immediate task. It allows people to actually take ownership and be fully enrolled into the vision that you all pursue. Intercultural competence. yeah, that I had to experience a lot and made a good amount of mistakes. But actually, just as a little story, whenever I started working in a country where I didn't know the culture and didn't know the language for the most part, one of the first things was to actually, bring aboard assistant, but really the job of that mostly lady was to be my cultural translator. That was a person I would always ask, is that correct? Am I misreading what's coming from that culture? Am I doing things within the correct cultural context? How is this or that behavior being read? And that was incredibly important. That allowed me to really understand and make decisions not based on whatever my cultural concepts are, but within that culture, while in the same time relying on on the capacity and skills and the values, which I think are universal to all of us. So yeah, the intercultural competence was something learned, hard learned, but I had to lean a lot into that. Trust. Trust is an interesting one because trust is not something you earn. Trust is something you need to give from the beginning, because in the moment you don't trust, you make people untrustworthy, and people feel that. So trust and giving the people the benefit of a doubt and bringing people in and allowing yourself to trust, and therefore creating an environment of let's say more emotional freedom and ability to speak up. I always found was incredibly important. Mobilization skills. That's something I actually always found interesting, because it's around mobilizing your team and around a shared purpose. Now, a shared purpose is something you really have to work through. It's, from my perspective, most of the time not enough to simply say, okay, that's the purpose, let's go. What I always very enjoyed and found really useful in my past was to actually do like a visioning seminars, workshop, in which we, with the group, with the core team, developed a shared purpose and formulated that, developed our vision, and therefore we're able to really, going forward, all connect to that. So I found that always a very important component of my work, and immensely enjoyed that process, actually. Let's go to acting, the actual enabling the change. And by the way, remember when I started with being, I had to read up. I just closed up right now the explanations, just so much easier. All right, so acting, enabling change. As acting says, that's the action component of the 5-dimension courage. Having courage to speak up, not for the sake of being contradictory, but for the sake to speak up and to see and to address things which you think are not going right. Important component. Creativity. For me, the ability to think beyond the immediate solution. Very closely related also to complexity awareness. You can only be fully creative if you allow yourself to be aware of complexity. It doesn't mean you have to understand the complexity. but it means you need to be aware of that, of the context you're operating in, and aware in which point your creativity might actually, in which point your ideas might actually clash. That can only do if you allow yourself to be aware of the complexity around this in the systemic dynamics. Optimism. Something I actually recently had a conversation where I did not realize, but to which extent actually the level of the optimism of the leaders, particularly in a crisis situation, impacts the others and impacts your team and their ability to believe in the future. That's a recent conversation where we talked about the crisis I worked with my team in Tajikistan. One of my former colleagues actually mentioned that the fact that I never even considered what we actually might have to close down the company, something which was very much on the mind of everybody else, kept that hope alive, this optimism alive. So it was interesting to hear how important that actually was. I was not aware of that at that moment. And the last one, perseverance. I think this is something where, as we develop that capacity in ourselves, it has a strong component of discipline, continually believing what you're doing is right. Huh? Pardon me? Victoria? Okay. And moving towards a direction without giving up. So those are. So I hope those skills and the 5-dimension resonates with you. I would like to invite you now into breakout rooms, and those rooms going to be organized along the 5-dimension: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And I would like to invite you to discuss or think about this question. In your capacity as leaders and as financial inclusion professionals or reflective practitioners, our coaches, how important are these skills? And how do you think on a daily basis you're embodying them? I think we will spend 10 minutes in the breakout rooms, and when we come out, we would like to, it would be wonderful if you could share your conversations. I'm just thinking of something in the chat. Okay. If you, when we come back, it would be beautiful if you could share your impressions. Yeah. Fernando, can we do the groups? Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
This was the most beautiful session that I've undergone in a long, long time, the breakout.
Thank you, Idea. Yeah. Great to hear that.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kadian. All right. So, how was it? Well, we just heard it was beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Who would like? So, let me maybe invite you to share with us. How about that? Now we have actually very little time left, but yes, Patrick, you're laughing. So, but I would propose we can start, we can share for the next 10 minutes. And if we're not, if we'd like to continue, whoever would like to stay on the call, maybe for another 20, then we make a closing session. And then if you like, we can stay on the call for another 20 minutes just to change and continue. Would that be good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect. All right. Who would like to start?
Yeah, I can go and along with I would invite my group mates as well to chip in.
Right.
I would try and summarize. So I think in our group, we did discuss a lot about both the personal, in our personal lives, how we see this. For us, the pillar was acting, which is creating change. Yeah. And we did discuss the 4 dimensions of it. And we discussed both in our personal lives and in our professional lives, how we have seen the 4 dimensions of acting play out. And I think we, out of the 4 dimensions, we ended up probably, it's my guess that we ended up spending a little more time on courage than the other dimensions. And I think one common theme in courage that came out was that, this was common probably across the 3 of us, is this whole element of being able to generate courage even under a condition of self-doubt.
Yeah.
So that would be my quick summary of what what I heard, but I would invite my other group mates to also chip in right now.
Well, yeah, I think you summarized it really well. The thing that I found interesting about it was that there's so much about self-management for us to be able to have courage, even when we're feeling a sense of vulnerability or a sense of threat, to be able to manage ourselves enough to be able to have the power to go forward, so to be able to kind of quiet some of those doubts, or when you have those doubts, still find the reasons why you want to go forward, have the courage to feel those uncomfortable feelings and go forward, which is also particularly important if you're going to be leading an organization through difficult times. Everyone's always going to be feeling a sense of self-doubt, of vulnerability, at certain times threat. And to be able to manage that within yourself and then transmit that to your organization, so the organization itself is able to have some kind of courage. Because what I would just notice is that all of these things, courage, optimism, creativity, perseverance, these are things that we're able to access at times when things are easier. Now, but when things are harder and you're able to self-manage and then transmit that to your organization, that's a skill that you can develop through time. And it's something that coaches certainly can help with. All right, I'll just keep talking, so I'm now going to go.
Thank you, Patrick. All right. Who would like to share?
Maybe I'll also share. So our discussion topic was being, and I was really amazed because recently I was taking a class on science of well-being, and well-being is like almost like being happy, but in a positive way, I guess. Like happiness is like a moment which happens once and then it disappears, but well-being stays with you for some time. And the basis is that when a person is happy and it's being well, the person will act in a kind way, maybe care for others, help others, and also care for the nature, sustainability. And that's why I guess this being is the core and first dimension of the inner development goals. And actually, when I started practicing, I started practicing just the little things, like the morning mindfulness, meditation, just sitting and listening to the sounds. Especially in the nature, it's really beautiful to listen to the wind and the sounds of the insects. And just these small exercises and steps, they really make me more productive, more calm. And yeah, and I think if we exercise in these skills in small steps, we can see the results.
Thank you, dear. Thank you, Jana. Yeah. What somebody else would like to share?
This is Blake.
Oh, hi, Blake.
Hi, everyone. So my group was talking about relating, but I think you could maybe apply this across all of the pillars. What stood out to me was a connection with psychological safety in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just feeling comfortable, confident, and just being able to be your authentic self in every realm of life, work, relationships, home life, etc. And I guess to Patrick's point, kind of like as all the ways that you can do that for yourself, as well as how others can help you with that as well. And with that being your best self, and being able to, from there, make improvements in the world with the sustainability goals or in other aspects of life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Blake.
So my group,
yes.
Yeah, my group was discussing thinking, and one of the things we said is, you know, it's interesting the thinking comes immediately after being, because then self-awareness, just that relationship to self then becomes very important even before you then begin developing the cognitive skills, the critical thinking, the perspective skills, the sense making. But if you don't have self-awareness, it becomes, you know, you then will struggle with developing some of this. We also agreed that it's, you know, it's a very important skill for leaders at every level, because then, especially where you're leading teams, you're having to provide a vision for the team, you're having to provide a strategic direction for the team, you're having to guide and direct the teams. Then it becomes very important to then have that long-term orientation and visioning, while at the same time, the world we are operating in, I mean, we talk about this all the time, is a VUCA world. You still need to have the complexity awareness so that you're able to adapt as and when it's necessary. So we said it actually, all of them are very important, but also recognize they're not technical skills you will go to school and learn. So it is being aware of those skills that you need to develop as you grow your self-awareness, and then intentionally putting in the effort to develop the skills that you need to develop.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Catherine. Yes, those are really beautiful insights. Anybody else would like to share?
I think we may be the last group to go.
And by the way, Catherine, you will learn those skills if you are attending the school that I've co-founded. So that's
there we go.
Part of our emphasis is building self-awareness, and that's definitely a component of it. So we had collaboration, and we talked a little bit about sort of, one of the things we talked about was about how to operationalize that and how to make it work, which I believe, I don't have the slide in front of me to see the specific subcategories, but yeah, we had an interesting wide-ranging conversation about sort of, you know, how it works in each of our professions. And you know, with Lux and me, we have very similar professions.
There we go.
It here. So yeah, yeah, we talked a little bit about co-creation, and you know, for me, operationalizing that, how that works both peer-to-peer, peer-to-mentor, peer-to-coach, you know, and that of course plays into inclusive mindset, it plays into communication, and I'm focusing on stuff related to me, but I'm leaving out other parts of the conversation. So I'd like to ask my fellow breakout mates to please jump in.
So,
guys. I don't know if Lux or Dr. Wafa.
Yeah, I think Alex, you really summarized it really well, and also I really like the idea that how you reframe soft skill to something else. Would you like to share a little bit about that, because it's like completely changing the perspective?
Yeah, I used a very strong word, and unsurprisingly, Dr. Wafa, who is, you know, is an experienced coach, came right in, you know, right in with one of those ICF competencies and picked right up on that. And yeah, to me, soft skills, soft always to me has an implication of like not being as important. We reframe them at HEA as universal skills, because you know, I fundamentally believe, both through, you know, I was saying, through professional experience, through personal experience, and through, you know, looking at what companies are recruiting for, what some of the biggest skills are that they're looking for in new hires. These are the skills that sort of make or break things for people in their lives. And so they are of universal importance. And so that was, you know, that was my logic in the renaming that I did.
Alex, I may kind of comment on that. Something which came up when you were saying about that is this idea of content versus context. In a sense of the hard skills is the ability to navigate content, create content, deliver on that, and so forth. The universal skills, as you have renamed them now, rightfully so, they, from my perspective, is the ability to actually sense the context and make sense in the sense of actually sensing into the context, but also making sense of context. And that's the ability to navigate reality. And something, I think, who was speaking, saying that before, we was talking about vision. I think that kind of goes along with that idea that a vision is something which can change, depending on the context we are operating in. Situation can change, and therefore the vision can change. However, to keep and to remain as an organization or as a community enrolled and be able into a vision and be able to navigate and adjust ourselves to that means having on a communal level and a level of universal skills, meaning skills we just talked about, like the inner development skills, as being the values based on which we are reading the world and we are expanding ourselves into the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much. To me, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does a lot. In fact, I was actually, before you spoke, I was actually wondering where do beliefs and values, personal beliefs and values fit into this whole frame?
Let me give this question to others. I have some thoughts, but I want to see if
I might say being.
Pardon me?
I said I might say being would be possibly where that fits. If we're sort of looking at, the idea of an inner compass, that definitely would, I think that would definitely fit. Our inner compasses are going to come from a lot of times, I think, our backgrounds and our backgrounds, and our experiences are going to inform sort of our senses of right and wrong, our senses of ethics. So I think that might be where it fits, but that's my take.
Beautiful.
If I may say, it's I think in being and relating. It's something between you and whatever you feel or whatever you relate to, and relating to others also, and respecting their beliefs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
I think the more secure we are in our own selves, the easier it is for us to empathize and open ourselves to others.
Absolutely.
I have a question here on this topic. May I ask?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I am reading this book called The Chimp Paradox. You may have come across it as well. It's a very beautiful book written by a psychologist. What it speaks about is, in terms of beliefs and values, it speaks about two kinds of beliefs and values. One is gremlins. He calls them gremlins and goblins. So goblins are basically, what we have learned before the age of 8, and gremlins are what we learn after the age of 8. And what he says is that what we learn before the age of 8 is not possible to be removed if it is not serving us. All we can do is manage it. And the gremlins, which we learn after the age of 8, those we can actually work on removing. So my question to you is, like, with that context, when certain beliefs and values of ours comes in the way of some of these things that we have spoken about here, or some of the wonderful things that we have spoken about here, what does one do to either manage them, if they are goblins, or remove them if they are gremlins?
Interesting question.
I don't know, but I'm thinking about changing my job title to Goblin Management.
Well, if I may comment there, I think what you just referred to are things we learn as children or even as adults, but which might have like a traumatic component to them, or experiences that inform our thinking and our perspective of perception towards the world, often on a level of, let's say, fear, defensiveness, or disconnection. Yeah. And that's where, you say, okay, that's what we want to work on, because that's what holds us back from allowing, like, say, the true inner compass to come through, to ground yourself in your deeper values. So some of what I think you just referred to were things where we work on. In some cases, I guess, Alec, you've been working a lot with children to help them get through that. In other cases, it's about how do you manage that. But in any case, the dimension of being is the core dimension of working through your inner constraints and through experiences which holding you back. That's the way I would see that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I just see that as a really big topic, like how to manage those kind of like automatic beliefs that you have that aren't serving you, or, even being aware of them. It's really at the heart of a lot of self-management and change. So there are a lot of different modalities I would think of, for talking, for first of all, becoming aware of what those beliefs may be, and being able to question them. And then the way that you're going to be able to address that would be, different depending on what you're doing. You can use, I like to use ACT. But so I'm not going to go into my my particular methodology. Yes, I see you're shaking your head there, Jana. But but it is really a core to self-management. It's a very good point. When you have these beliefs, becoming aware of them. Sometimes you can change them, sometimes you can't. But being able to be able to react to them in a way that serves you in the moment is kind of key to that. Okay.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, thank you all very, very much. And thank you for the sharing and for the special insights. I've taken a couple of things away with me. This is really, really, really insightful. Now, going forward, I just like to share with you some of the thoughts I have currently around what about maybe a deeper exploration of that concept, of that framework, and questions in general I'm curious about. I know we have a mixed group here, people from both directions, from the let's say the coaches, so the professional around introspection and reflection, and also colleagues from the financial inclusion. So one of the things which came up to me was the question of how can we actually integrate the essence of the inner development goals into corporate governance. I know it's kind of a jump, but on a very practical level, if we see that, if we agree that those skills and capacities are key for a mindset shift which will enable sustainability and a sustainable development going forward, then it will be key to integrate them into governance of organizations. So something I'd like in the future to explore, what opportunities and risk will that bring with it, to see if we can integrate the development goals into the ESG, the environmental social governance, for example, so that boards of companies can actually say, hey, being able to think long-term, to think sustainable is what we want our management, our leadership to be able to do. And based on that, we would like to run programs and initiate programs within our institutions and organizations that will develop those skill sets in our management. So basically integrated from that side. That's something I'm very curious about. I'd like also to discuss more, maybe in a slightly different group, but where everybody's very welcome. I think the other question is what role will reflective practitioners and practices, coaching and coaching skill play in our collective inner development journey? I think that's pretty much at the core of how we need to address it. How can we integrate coaching and inner development into organizational context? And one other thing which I find really fascinating, would love to explore, is what does actually female leadership mean in this context? Now, that's not necessarily something to discuss today. I think we're obviously running out of time, and I think we had very interesting conversations. But those are things which I think going forward would be really interesting to explore. I don't know in how far that resonates. Any of those questions?
Actually, it resonates a lot. Thanks for sharing that. What came up for me was that somewhere possibly the IDGs could inform a self-governance, governance of self, and the SDGs could inform corporate governance. And then if you think of it visually or diagrammatically, there is a link between the IDGs informing the SDGs as well, and self-governance informing the corporate governance as well. So it's almost like a rectangle with arrows running this way and this way.
Beautiful.
That is what came up for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Hi, Jana. Maybe I have to jump off soon, but I wanted to part with a thought that I was actually having a day before this webinar, and thank you. I think it was really enlightening. I think it's really interesting to see this connection between IDG and SDG and how personal kind of development is a foundation for success for teams, for corporations, and in a broader sense. But I don't mean to throw a grenade into this discussion, but what I was thinking about yesterday, I live and work in Lithuania, which is one of the Baltic states, and we have this proximity to the war, which is taking place in Ukraine. And so I was kind of reflecting on our discussion about how our inner development goals can support SDG, and yet I can't help but think of how, on a very basic level, we're still, as a society, as countries, as people, are still functioning on the basis of conflict and war and land grabs and kind of this very 19th century or even prehistoric kind of motivations. And certainly, I think that part of the problem is very much it's a kind of a personal problems being magnified in the context of a society, countries, and so which I think makes this point even more relevant, because I think it's just such a fundamental thing. And I can just help but think that how much time are we wasting dealing with this kind of issues in the world. And this conflict is not just regional. There are lots of things bubbling up across the world, Middle East, Southeast Asia, other parts. And I think you know, I'd be curious to learn more about the aspects of a sort of a personal development issues and conflict resolution, because that's, I think, a lot of you know, kind of issues stemming from those kind of things. So so that was my thought before the webinar, and it kind of got reinforced by today's discussion.
Thank you, Andre. Very, very relevant. Actually, when you were saying that, I was actually had a thought about maybe another, another webinar was also an idea to invite a colleague of mine who is very much involved in that, particularly around the around peace negotiations and around those areas, including the IDGs. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's really, you know, I was leaning into SDGs right now, or sorry, into the ESG as a corporate governance component, coming from, you know, from our business background. But you're very right. This is actually the base. Those are the values that, if we agree and purposefully, consciously aiming on developing them in our communities and basing our political decisions on, then we have a chance at some point to overcome those dynamics from the 19th century or even before. It's a long way, it's a long path. You've got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I think and I think it's really, it sort of sits in you know, this section 3, relating, right?
Yes.
All right, so thank you so much, guys. I'm gonna have to sign off. Thank you, Jana. Thank you, everybody.
Andre, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, I think we're also slowly running out of time, but before we leave, I'd like to very swiftly share with you a little bit about the, let me see, but yeah. About the wider IDG community. So today, the IDG community is actually a really big one. We talk about around 35,000 people worldwide. They have currently around 500 IDG hubs, which are basically local organizations where people come together under the idea, under the intention to help implementing the IDGs in lots of different fields, be it politics, education, healthcare, corporate, and so forth. And those are all volunteers organizations. The IDG themselves see themselves more often as an educational and co-creation institution, and with the idea that the framework is used somewhat as a marketing concept, parallel to the SDGs. They even use the same visual, the same company which developed the visuals for the inner development goals, the same as for the SDGs. Yeah. Now, something I'd like to share with you. There is an IDG summit which is happening in Sweden, in Stockholm, in October. As I said, I visited the summit last year, and it was a really incredible opportunity to meet with people who are involved in that space and really focus their work and their contribution to the world around that framework. For me, that was a really inspiring experience. So if anybody is interested to join that this year, we'll share the information, the links for that. And yeah. So that would be it from my side. It was beautiful having you. It was beautiful having you. It was, as I said, my first webinar, so I hope it made sense. Yeah. Anybody would like to share anything to us, Ian?
Thank you so much for doing this. It's a fascinating topic. I was involved in international development in the past. My career hasn't really gone down that path in recent years. But now that I'm getting into life coaching and seeing kind of this, the combination of these together, it's given me hope that I could maybe get back into that space.
You know, there is something about that. I have heard recently people, particularly also in the development field, becoming cynical. You know, there's a certain level of cynicism around the structures and around what's happening. So I think this is also really a path to kind of overcome the cynicism and start looking at that again with some, you know, pride and renewed energy.
I just wanted to share about an organization which I am connected with in India. It's called the Health Awareness Center. Their philosophy is self-care, is earth care, is human care. You know? And they have this beautiful model of educating people on how to care for their own health. And in the process, it's not, probably it's funny, but how when we care about our own health, really, I mean, not from the perspective of a healthcare industry, but really caring for ourselves, we actually end up caring for nature as well and for earth as well. So it's a very sustainable and a very virtuous cycle that sets in.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, fully agreed. Yes, Alec, please.
I wanted to thank you. You know, this is very much, you know, feels like almost you know, the fate as, you know, when I started my coaching journey, it very much provided a framework for a lot of the things that I had been doing sort of organically. And, you know, you and Lux and Fernando, who, you know, that as you know, that, you know, within that cohort have heard me talk about that. The IDGs very much add a new framework for a lot of what I'm doing professionally as an educator right now. And I'm super excited to explore these even further and look at more formal integration into what we're doing. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome, my dear. It was really a pleasure. Okay.
Yeah, I will quickly come forward here to thank you for bringing such a wonderful, extremely insightful, and most importantly, an absolutely relevant topic into discussion. And I see that everyone who's joining in this space engaging with us very intentionally. So Jana, thank you for co-creating this wonderful energy and giving all of us great opportunities to continue to reflect and then create ripples moving forward. So, and as thanking Jana, I would also like to thank all of you who are in this space or joining us, and those who are also watching this later online and at Ignite Global. We are passionate in sharing knowledge, skills, and a reflective space for healing, expansion of our consciousness. So we look forward to bringing you more sessions like this in the future. So stay tuned. Once again, thank you for joining us. And Jana, once again, thank you very much. Deep gratitude. Thank you.
Fernando, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Beautiful. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Yes, have a good night.
Good night.
Have a good night. Спасибо, Яна. Было классно.
Вам спасибо, Желдец.
Сделали первое, наконец-то.